Hi, wonderful people. I'm Leah Rapaner. As a sociologist, University of Melbourne professor, founder of the Gender Equity Initiative, director of the Future of Work Lab, woman, wife, and mother, I've made it my life's mission to take down every ridiculous gender myth out there. Together, we'll deep dive into the research to get to the bottom of all these misperceptions that are holding all of us back. Don't worry, I've studied these types of questions for decades, and after publishing countless articles exactly on these topics, I know when they are nonsense or real truths. And I'm going to help you learn that too. So here we go. Let's do it. This is Misperceived. Let me ask you a question. How did you sleep last night? Was your sleep restless and sound? Did you have a deep sleep or were you constantly interrupted? And what did you think about while you were sleeping? Did you think about work? Did you have a work dream nightmare? Did someone wake you up? Does your partner snore? Did your kids come in and disrupt you in the middle of the night? What did your sleep look like? I actually am a very deep sleeper. Sometimes I find that work stuff interrupts me, but very rarely am I interrupted by my family. But I am always waking my husband up, left, right, and center. My sleep is very sound like a baby. I love to sleep. I love a bed. I love clean pajamas. I could spend my entire life in bed. I would like to be in my bed at 8:30 at night. Please don't invite me to anything after 9 p.m. And if you're at my house, please leave because I would like to get into bed and go to sleep. But my partner doesn't sleep very well. And part of that, he blames me, which I think is actually a total jerk move. Something about snoring and restlessness. And I don't know, I feel great. But for many couples, this is kind of it, right? How do you sleep within the family? We often think about sleep as this purely biological process. Do you have a Fitbit or an Apple Watch or whatever? Are you counting your sleep? Are you looking to see how you're doing? Are you looking at whether your sleep is disrupted? And then do you believe it, right? We think about sleep as this highly medical process. You need to have 7+ hours. You need to see if it's deep sleep. Are you getting your REM sleep? What's going on for you? Are you in a dark room? Are the lights pulled down? Is it cool? Sleep is biological. But I'm going to tell you, sleep is also social. Sleep is a social process. We sleep together, we sleep with our children, and we may think that separate beds are a big problem. It's a sign that your marriage is on the rock. Or we may feel like it is the greatest solution ever made. Would you sleep in a separate bed and a separate room from your partner? What do you think? We would love to hear this. Is that actually a sign that your marriage is in the dumps? Your partnership is in the dumps, the relationship's on the rocks? Or do you think actually separate rooms are the best thing ever invented because then everyone gets good sleep? On this episode of Misperceived, we're going to think about the misperception that sleep is just a biological process. Or is it actually social? And if it's social, do women sleep differently to men? So what does the research show? Well, the first thing we need to know is that sleep, of course, is a biological process. And the interesting thing is that women do need more sleep. They spend more time in sleep. They fall asleep faster. They spend more time in a deep sleep. And they're more likely to nap. Women need more rest. The question is why? Well, there's multiple factors that help explain it. Part of this is biological. We know that hormones can interrupt women's sleep. Menstruation, pregnancy, and menopause can all impact your sleep. You can imagine cramps waking you up in the middle of the night. When you're pregnant, the baby moving, you're uncomfortable. And I cannot tell you how many women have told me about the hot flashes that come and wake them up in the middle of the night. That once they hit that hormonal transition of menopause, that their sleep gets really, really disrupted. So those biological factors, those hormones, can be interrupting women's sleep. And neuroscientists also show that women need more sleep because they use more of their brains. They use more of their brains to things like multitasking. Now, I've talked to you about multitasking on a previous episode where we show you that multitasking is something that women do more of, but that it takes a cognitive toll. Now, here's the interesting thing. Multitasking is complex thinking. And the result of that is that women need more time to recover in their brain because they're spending more time in this deep thinking work. So there are these biological factors that are determining women's sleep: hormones, multitasking, and difficult thinking. But there's also social reasons that women sleep differently. Women have different responsibilities at home. They're much more likely to be balancing work and family demands. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the research we did, but then some of the research also from my colleague, David Mom. David Mom is at the University of Cincinnati. He's one of the nicest human beings ever. Hi, David. I love you and I miss you. And he started out by looking at this research for working class parents in the US. So he found something interesting. He found that women are more likely to stay in the marital bed, even if their husband is snoring all night. And the reason they stay in is because they didn't want to leave that marital bed because it looks like they're not then committed to the marriage or there's something wrong in the marriage. So they'll stay in the bed to sleep next to their partners, even if their snoring wakes them up, because that is seen as a commitment to the marriage. And from David's research, too, another interesting little finding is that women talked about the need to protect men's sleep, that women were actually trying to absorb all the nighttime interruptions to make sure that he was well rested for the next day, that his sleep was more important because he was the breadwinner. He needed to go out and enter the work world rested and refreshed. And so for a lot of women in that study, what they were talking about was, yes, there were all these disruptions. Yes, the kids came. Yes, they were snoring. Yes, their sleep was interrupted, but it was important that he got good sleep. It didn't really matter if she got good sleep. He got good sleep because he needed to show up the next day at work. And this is really interesting because this is showing that social norms, the way in which we view our marriages, the way in which we view women's roles, impact our sleep. I want us to just pause a minute and think about what this all means, because I've talked to you about this across all of these podcasts. I've told you things like women can't multitask. I've told you things like women are balancing competing demands, that they're exhausted, that they feel like they need to do it all, but they can't. And now I'm telling you that on top of all of this, women also feel like their sleep is secondary to everyone else's needs in the family, that they are putting their sleep to the side to make sure that kids get what they need in the middle of the night, that partners get what they need in the middle of the night, and that their sleep doesn't get protected. So they're protecting other people's sleep, but actually sacrificing their own. And I'm telling you this despite the fact that there is decades of research showing that good sleep is so critical to good health, both in the short term and the long term. If you want to have long-term protective health, you need to have good sleep. And yet we have one group, women, who's often sacrificing their sleep for the family. What happens in your house? Who's sleeping well? Who do the kids go to in the middle of the night? Is your sleep disrupted? And if so, by what? There's research also showing that the kids are much more likely to go to the mother and interrupt her sleep when things go wrong. And I remember this from my own young daughter. She would come to me, to my side of the bed when she had nightmares or she couldn't sleep, or I don't know if y'all had this, but like at the age of 3, she just was like up from 3 a.m. to 5 a.m., bright-eyed and awake for reasons I don't know. But that came to me, and I was one who solved the problem in the middle of the night. And what this is the result of your daytime activity. I was the primary caregiver. I was the one she went to during the day when she needed things. And so, of course, she's going to go to me in the middle of the night. Kids aren't malicious. They're not like, oh, I'm going to interrupt mom's sleep because she's exhausted and I want to mess with her. They're just doing the waking patterns. They're going to you at night because they go to you during the day. And what research shows, if we go around the world and we look at other countries like Sweden, where men take more of the childcare, more of the parental leave, they assume more of the primary care role. One of the outcomes of this is that kids are more likely to go to fathers too and interrupt their sleep. So these patterns of gender and care impact our day-to-day lives, but then they also come into our night times, into our non-waking hours. And if you can make fathers the default parent more during the day, they will go to them more at night. And of course, I'm talking about little kids, right? But older kids also disrupt mother's sleep more than fathers. So there's work by Jenny Hilsup and Sarah Arbour in the Journal of Sociology, and they show that Mothers of teenagers are also more likely to stay up at night, worrying about their kids, waiting for them to come home during curfew, and making sure that they're safe and at home, that their sleep waits until everyone's back at home, even as kids get older. We've been doing research on the mental load, and what we're showing too is that mothers' mental loads are keeping them up at night, that they're being awoken by the demands that they hold during the day. Has this ever happened to you? Have you forgotten to do something at work or for the family? And all of a sudden, midnight, 1 a.m., you're up, boom, remembering? That's the mental load coming in and disrupting your sleep. What does it look like? How does it impact your life? And what are the things that are coming in and from your day to day? I'm going to tell you a little bit about a research project that I did with the wonderful Xiao Monica Tan, David Mom, and Belinda Hewitt for a project that we had from the Australian Research Council. And what we were interested in looking at is how do people sleep around the world? So in this study, we published it in the Journal of Marriage and the Family, and we were looking at sleep for 14,000 partnered people coming across 23 European countries. What we were interested in is how did the sleep look? Was it restless or was it sound? And what we found is that in 22 of the 23 countries, women more than men reported that their sleep was restless in the prior week. They were experiencing more disrupted sleep overall. So women's sleep is more disrupted than men's in 22 of the 23 surveyed European countries. Then we were interested in what were the things that would disrupt women's sleep? What mattered, right? If you're in a partnership. And we picked partners because I told you that they're negotiating sleep, much like they're negotiating housework. And maybe not even negotiating it, right? Because you might just be stepping in and doing it. Like, I don't know that people are saying at the dinner table, hey, if the kid gets up, whose sleep is going to get disrupted tonight? Or how are we going to make sure that you get good sleep tonight? I'm just going to stay in the marital bed while you snore, and then our kid's going to come in and disrupt us. I don't think people actually negotiate this, much like they do housework or childcare or who's going to pick up the kids after school. We're falling into this default sleep patterns. You probably are doing this without even knowing you're doing it or realizing you're doing it, and then finding that, oh, wait a minute, actually that is happening to me. And so this is a way in which social norms instruct our lives in ways we don't even know. So what we were interested in seeing is who and what was disrupting their sleep. And what we found was that women's sleep was disrupted most by having a child under 5 in the house. So little kids came in and disrupted the mom's sleep. But men's sleep was more restless or disrupted if their family finances weren't going well. So both men and women were having disrupted sleep, but from different mechanisms. For the women, it was the kids. And from the men, it was stress around finances. And then we found that for both of them, if they worked a stressful job, they also had disrupted sleep. So everyone's sleep was disrupted by work, but women's sleep was disrupted by the kids, and men's sleep was disrupted by stress around the finances, money. And then we were interested in something kind of neat or different. We wanted to know if you live in a country in which women have more power, economic power, resources, and financial power, do they sleep better, right? Like there's studies showing, and again, we can talk about this in another podcast, but if women live in a country where women have more power, they do less housework, they do less childcare, they have more equity. So do those patterns kind of transcend for sleep? If women live in more gender equal societies, do they sleep better? And what we found was that yes, women slept better in more gender equal societies, in societies where women had more economic power, more political power, more education, spent more time in the labor market. But so did men. Men also slept better. Everyone slept better in a country where women held more power. Now, this is interesting because there's a lot of research showing actually that men have better health outcomes if they live in more gender equal countries. They end up with better health. They're more happy. They take less risks. They're less likely to die. Their mortality goes down. And so living in a gender equal context brings this host of benefits to women and men alike. And what we're showing is that men sleep better too. So not only do you get more equal divisions of housework and childcare and men get better health, but everyone sleeps better too. I think about this a lot, actually. We often think about patriarchy or gender inequality as being bad for women, and of course it is. It's bad for women to have women with less power and resources and ability to get higher education. But it's really bad for men too. And it's bad for men in part because it puts a huge amount of pressure on men to keep up with the family finances when we know that men are earning less money and it's difficult to support a family on one wage. And that pressure comes top down into men's lives and into men's sleep. It makes sense that they're sleeping worse when they are solely responsible for the family finances. It makes sense that their sleep is disrupted. And it makes sense that if they live somewhere where women are more empowered, they make more money, they're more likely to have higher education, they're more likely to work. It makes sense that they sleep better in those countries too, because there's less pressure on them to be bringing in all the money. And so gender equality is not just good for women. It's good for men too. And it's good for all of us. And when we talk about these conversations, sometimes we sit just on the side of women. But I think it's important to point out that there's an incredible amount of pressure that goes to men too in these traditional gender norms. So let's go back to the original question. Is it a misperception that sleep is just a biological process, or is sleep social? And if so, do women sleep differently to men? The answer is yes. It's a misperception that sleep is just biological. Yes, of course, it has biological components, but your sleep is also highly social. And what we see is that women need more sleep, but they're increasingly reporting fragmented and disrupted sleep. We know that women literally need more sleep to meet their biological processes, but they can't get that sleep because of their social roles. And we know that mothers are protecting father's sleep, in part because they're protecting the financial providers. But we know that the men who are experiencing financial distress report worse sleep. So this begs the question, as women are working more, are these patterns eroding? And our research shows no. Working women, even if they hold power, they're managers, they're also more likely to have disrupted sleep. We can deep dive into that in another podcast, but the short answer is sleep is social. And gender roles that prioritize men's roles as a provider and the breadwinner are entering into our dreaming time. But there's good news here too, and that's that if we actually empower women in all the ways in which we think it's valuable and giving women more resources, that we find that there's all these knock-on effects in other aspects of our lives. It's not just good to give women access to higher status positions or more full-time work or more professional work or more education because it's good for their economic power and their ability to engage in the labor market. It has all these other effects. It's good for men. It's good for their sleep. It benefits us all. And if we can bring men into the care, like they do in some of these countries that are more progressive on their gender norms, then what we see too is that nighttime waking from little kids gets equalized across partners. Sometimes they go to dad, sometimes they go to mom. And so there's all these other benefits of living in gender equal cultures that transcend just money and power. So, as per usual, thanks for listening to Misperceived, where you don't need a PhD, you just get to come hang out with me. I wish you the best sleep. This podcast was produced with the support of the incredible Sophie Squires, the wonderful Kate Danger, the fantastic Rich Berner, and the one and only, the best ever made, Serena Reagan. I would like to acknowledge that our podcast is recorded on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people listening today.